The government policy announced last Thursday, and it's Monday when I last checked, and today some Tory Brexiteers ripped a hole in it. They are suggesting they weren't quite meaning to do that, and they were just probing and putting down an amendment because they wanted to test exactly what it was the government was up to here. But what they were doing was actually trying to do a show of strength, and they won. It relates to the customs elements of the government white paper on Brexit, painstakingly put together over a long period. And one of the things it says in the white paper is that Britain would collect EU tariffs at its border, at the UK's border, but it wouldn't expect the EU to do a reciprocal arrangement, because the government knew that was a deal breaker. There are probably some other deal breakers lurking in here, but the rebels put down an amendment trying to add as a deal breaker the idea that the EU would collect tariffs for Britain. And the government has accepted it. Now, with a pretty Jesuitical straining of language, they're saying this isn't actually a breach, it's consistent with government policy, but virtually nobody believes them, least of all the rebels who put down that amendment with a view to exposing the weakness of the government. They're a pretty controlled group, the European Research Group, pretty disciplined, and one of the messages that went out to their MPs, though, today was don't be smug. I have to tell the organisers of that group, some of those MPs are failing to follow that injunction tonight. I talked before about how the Prime Minister seems to be sort of dashing for the recess like someone running for a bus shelter in a storm. And now we discover, under review as we speak, the idea of bringing forward the date of the recess. Parliament might start its summer holidays as soon as Thursday rather than Tuesday of next week. But that won't save the Prime Minister from potentially a resignation speech on Wednesday from Boris Johnson and a meeting with her own MPs. But here's how today's action-packed day for the Prime Minister went. At the Farnborough Air Show, Theresa May was trying to sell her Chequers Brexit deal as one that works for business. But today she had to surrender to pro-Brexit Tory backbenchers who want to kill off her Brexit plans.
Like these. Oh, wow.
When she got back to London, the Prime Minister had to defend the fact that she'd accepted an amendment from pro-Brexit Tories that requires the EU to collect British tariffs at its borders, something the EU has said is completely unacceptable.
I would not have gone through all the work that I did to ensure that we reached that agreement, only to see it changed in some way through these bills. They do not change that Chequers agreement. They do not change that Chequers agreement.
The pro-Leave Tories are one of three groups on the march today, mustering forces for different Brexit outcomes. By getting the government to cave in on the trade bill, pro-Brexit Tories think they've proved they have the numbers to stop the entire Chequers plan and have the support of party members in doing that.
Everybody wants Mrs May to take a tougher line with the EU, and they want this referendum delivered, and actually delivered in a way that respects that result, not membership or a renegotiation of membership of the EU again by the back door.
But a rival protest encircling Westminster got a new figurehead today. The campaign for a second referendum got the backing of the former Education Secretary, Justine Greening.
I think Parliament's reached an impasse, and there is no option I can see that Parliament will be able to support. Every option's going to get voted down. If that's the case, then I think only the British people can give us the clear decision that we need on the right way forward.
The least raucous marchers are those backing Theresa May's Chequers deal. Pro-Remain Tories suggested by caving in to pro-Brexit Tories, the government was actually helping to finish it off.
Tiny minority of the House of Commons as a whole are trying to hold us all to ransom about a reasonable deal with the European Union.
One has to wonder now, who is in charge? Who's running Britain? Is it the Prime Minister, or is it the Honourable Member for North East Somerset? I know where my money's sitting at the...
Number 10 insists it isn't running scared of Jacob Rees-Mogg's group of Brexiteers, the European Research Group. One in the group says the plan is to push government policy back to a Canada-style free trade agreement, even if that means a different Prime Minister. It is a bit of a tall order, isn't it? She probably won't survive a policy shift like that.
Well, I certainly wanted the policy to change, and I'm very pleased that it has changed.
You're not particularly bothered who's the Prime Minister, or not bothered whether it's still her?
This is about the country at the end of the day, not about personalities. I don't mind if it's her or whoever does it, just as long as it's done properly and it's really done with the proper passion.
The former Brexit secretary spoke from the backbenchers for the first time since his resignation, but he spared Theresa May a full-blown Technicolor resignation speech.
Business. I thought it'd be rather mundane until I walked into what appears to be this rhetorical firefight we've had so far in the debate.
Allies of the former Foreign Secretary say Boris Johnson is weighing up whether to deliver his resignation statement just as the Prime Minister sits down after question time on Wednesday.
Gary Gibbon. We're joined from Westminster by the former Attorney General and leading Conservative Remainer, Dominic Grieve. Dominic Grieve, what an extraordinary day. Rees-Mogg is now in charge.
I'm not sure I would quite characterise it like that, but there's no doubt that the Prime Minister has felt constrained to accept a series of amendments, two of which are relatively innocuous, but two of which were clearly designed to wreck her own policy and strategy. And that's not a very good place to be.
Could you have signed up to the White Paper?
The White Paper is far from perfect, and one can have justifiable criticisms of it. But that having been said, it is the opening position for the United Kingdom in one of the most important negotiations in peacetime in our modern history. And I am content to support the Prime Minister in trying to achieve the outline of what she set out. Doubtless there will have to be more compromises along the way, and there will be more challenges, but not to give her that support and to try to undermine her in the way in which some of my colleagues have done today is massively counterproductive and not in the national interest.
Let's get it clear. If those 4 amendments go through, all 4 of them, will you support the bill?
The bill has got to go on the statute book on the basis that we're leaving. The threat, as I understand it from some of my colleagues, was that if they didn't get these amendments, they would destroy the bill, thereby completely undermining the government's position.
But will you oppose those amendments, all of them?
Not all of them, no. 2 of them are innocuous. 2 of them, in my view, are not. And those 2 I will be voting against this evening.
How many are you?
I've no idea how many we will be, because this debate is taking place in the chamber at the moment, and in a sense the outcome of this it matters to me, but it matters less than making a very clear statement that we cannot continue with this kind of bullying undermining the government.
But are you prepared to see the government collapse over this?
I have no desire to see the government collapse over this at all, and nor do I think there's any prospect of the government collapsing because any action I'm taking.
Well, you know, the extraordinary thing is we have these events in Finland with Trump and Putin. We have the shambles in the House of Commons today. The ordinary elector must be looking in and thinking, what has become of our country and our world?
I share the despair. I came into Parliament to try to do good for my country, and at the moment we are mired in a most terrible crisis, which is the result of a paralysis which is itself induced by the referendum decision 2 years ago, and I'm afraid has a slightly inevitable quality about it.
Give us a path out.
The path out is that we have to be willing to listen to each other. We have to be willing to compromise, which some of my colleagues this evening show a remarkable lack of ability to do. And we have to try to identify what the best way out is and listen to what the public are saying to us.
A second referendum?
That's a possibility, because it may be the only way of resolving it, and I think probably would be capable of resolving it.
Are you with Justin Greening on three questions?
I would need to discuss with Justine how one would handle that, but it's clear that if you have a referendum, you've got to consider that one of the outcomes will be one that you may not favour yourself.